Good evening. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Thursday, Yom Hamishi. Let's light up the darkness. Let me move this there. Who's in the house on a Thursday? Yehud in South Carolina, Lucy in Minnesota, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Night, Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Shandora in the Bronx, Belle in Texas. I got a big kick out of the recent joke. Shalom, class. Thanks always, Sal and Nina. Yes, new joke went up today on our Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. A classic. You guys know I wrote a joke book, right? I haven't mentioned that in a while. Let My People Laugh. Greatest Jewish jokes of all time. It's a bestseller available on Amazon. Just search for Salvador Litvak. You'll come right to it. Bella in Florida. Excuse me. Where'd it go on me? Bella in Florida, Gail in Kansas, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Nancy in North Carolina, Michelle in Jupiter. And why is it skipping on me? Michelle in Jupiter, Lorraine in Texas, Renee in Indiana, Sharon in New Jersey, Paula in the Great Northwest. Chaim in Florida, Rochelle in Modesto, Bito in Panama, Alan in New York City, Mickey in New Jersey. Welcome, everybody. Today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Daniel Oretsky and the Oretsky family. And I'd like to dedicate this episode to the health, happiness, and hatzlacha of the entire Oretsky family. Daniel, thank you so much for your ongoing support of AT Daily, enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. In the merit of that, may you and all your family be showered in blessings. And we say Amen. Tiskula mitzvahs. May you be strengthened to perform many more mitzvahs. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode of AT Daily, just go to donate.accidentaltalmudist.com. Pretty sure that's our link, donate.accidentaltalmudist.com. Certainly there's a donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. I should know that. And certainly there's a donate button at accidentaltalmudist.org. We are a nonprofit. We've been so focused on obviously promoting Guns N' Moses these days. It is going to be in a theater near you, thank God, in September. Official announcement probably tomorrow or by Monday. But yeah, going to a lot of theaters in September. But, you know, this is what we do every day. Accidental Talmudist is a 501c3 supported by your donations. I know so many of the people in the class are recurring donors, monthly donors. You can't imagine how much that means to us. It's so important. It just costs money to produce all this content, to pay for our assistant. There's all kinds of web stuff. The guy who runs our website, the guy who runs our app. There's Google. There's like a Google grant, that allows people to see Accidental Talmudist.org more often. But there's a company that helps us optimize that. That costs money. Whatever. Running a nonprofit costs money. I don't have to explain it to you. And we appreciate every donation so much. So donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Okay. Our daf today is page 52 here in Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud. We're working our way through chapter 4. We opened Mishna number 3 yesterday. And the concept here was if there's a garden or a bathhouse that is surrounding or attached to an idol, okay, well, using the bathhouse is not unless that's how the idolaters worship the idolatry, that's not really performing idolatry. So a Jew could use that bathhouse. But if he has to pay to use it and that money goes to the priests of that idolatry, so then he can't, right? Then he can't. And there was this other concept that we're going to go into now in the same Mishnah, that when an idolater creates an idol, even though he hasn't worshipped it yet, as soon as he manufactures it, that idol, it's an object of idolatry, even though it hasn't technically been worshipped yet, it's already prohibited. For a Jew cannot benefit from it in any way. If a Jew manufactures an idol, there's no guarantee that it's going to be used for idolatry, so it's not a prohibited object until it actually gets used for idolatry, and then it would be rendered prohibited for any kind of benefit. Okay, we're picking this up close to the bottom of page 51b. The Mishnah taught that an idolater's object of idolatry is prohibited immediately, i.e. as soon as it is fashioned for that purpose, right? He fashioned it for idolatry. He just fashioned some kind of figurine that wasn't made for idolatry, and later he repurposed it to idolatry. Okay, so it wasn't rendered prohibited as soon as he made it. But if he created an idol for the purpose of idolatry, it's prohibited as soon as he fashions it. So the Gemara asks, whose opinion is expressed in the Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, it is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. As it is taught in the Baraisa, you shall destroy all the places where the nations that you are to dispossess served their gods upon the high mountains and upon the hills and under every leafy tree. Deuteronomy 12:2. The verse is speaking of vessels that were used by the idolaters for their idolatry in the Holy Land before Joshua led the children of Israel into there. One might have thought that the vessels are prohibited even if the idolaters fashioned them but did not complete them, or completed them but did not bring them to their idol, or brought them to the idol but did not use them for idolatry. Might one have thought that in the case of that in these cases the vessels are prohibited? The verse states where the nations that you are to dispossess served their gods, right? Served their gods. So this indicates that the vessels are not prohibited until they are used for worship. This would contradict what our Mishnah says. It is from here that the sages stated a Gentile's object of idolatry is not prohibited until it is worshipped, but a Jew's object of idolatry is prohibited immediately. This is the statement of Rabbi Yishmael, not what our Mishnah says. Rabbi Akiva says the matters are reversed. A Gentile's object of idolatry is prohibited immediately, but a Jew's object of idolatry is not forbidden until it is actually worshipped, until it is used for idolatry. Our Mishnah is therefore in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The master said above, the verse is speaking of vessels that were used by the Gentiles for idolatry. And the Gemara asks, isn't it written, you shall destroy all the places, Deuteronomy 12:2. And this indicates that the verse is not referring to vessels. It's referring to locations and everything that's built there, presumably the temple of idolatry, the idols used for idolatry. The Gemara answers, if the law stated in this verse is not applicable for the matter of places that are worshipped, where you actually worship a place, like we talked about worshiping mountains earlier in the tractate, well, then it must apply to another matter, and the verse cannot apply to the places themselves, as they are not rendered prohibited. As it is written, you shall destroy their gods upon the high mountains, indicating that one is not required to destroy the mountains themselves as their gods. Something that is attached to the ground is not rendered forbidden, and therefore, even if the idolaters worship the mountain itself, it does not need to be destroyed. So it's not places, it's things, vessels. Now we're on page 52a. Since the verse does not apply to places that were themselves worshipped, apply it to the matter of vessels that were used for idolatry. And it is from here that the sages stated a Gentile's object of idolatry is not prohibited until it is worshipped, but a Jew's object of idolatry is prohibited immediately. Now on 52a. The Gemara questions how the law with regard to an object of idolatry is derived from this verse. But didn't we interpret this verse as being stated with regard to vessels that are used in idolatry and not to the object of idolatry? Right now we're making a distinction. So imagine that the idolater, he has set up his statue of some false deity and he's going to bow to it and worship it. What are the vessels? So the vessels are how he brings his offerings to the idol, or what he deposits his offering into beside the idol, right? The vessels that are needed for him to do his worship and bring his offerings to the idol. Those are the service vessels, so to speak. But didn't we interpret this verse as being stated with regard to the vessels of idolatry and not the actual object of idolatry? So the Gemara answers, the verse states, you shall destroy all the places where the nations that you are to dispossess served their gods. That's Deuteronomy 12:2. Again, now the verse juxtaposes their gods to the places. Now we're saying that the places refers to the vessels, so i.e. the vessels that were used to serve them. So just as the vessels are not forbidden until they are used for worship, so too are their gods, right? The statues, the idols. They are also not forbidden until they are actually worshipped. That's the view of Rabbi Yishmael. And Rabbi Akiva, who does not consider the terms juxtaposed, he could say to you that the word es, written in the verse before the term their gods, separates the matter of their gods from the matter of the vessels. We're going to have different laws for the idols and for the vessels. The Gemara asks, and as for the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, we found a source for the law that a Gentile's object of idol worship is not prohibited until it is worshipped. From where does he derive that a Jew's object of idol worship is prohibited as soon as it is fashioned? Again, this is not the halacha, it's not the way it's written in our Mishna, but it's Rabbi Yishmael's view. So how would Rabbi Yishmael justify his view? From deriving it from what? So the Gemara answers, this is based on logical reasoning. From the fact that a Gentile's idol is not forbidden until it is worshipped, it stands to reason that a Jew's idol is prohibited immediately. And the Gemara asks, why not say that the Jew's idol is not forbidden at all? And the Gemara answers, now the status of a Jew's idol cannot be revoked, and the idol requires interment, burying it. Is it possible that it does not become prohibited? And the Gemara challenges, but one could say that a Jew's idol is forbidden only once it is worshipped, just as a Gentile's idol is forbidden only once it is worshipped. Why are we making this distinction between an idol fashioned by a Gentile and an idol fashioned by a Jew? And the Gemara answers, the verse states, and I took your sin, the calf that you had made, and I burned it with fire. Deuteronomy 9:21. Moses, in his final sermon, referring back to the incident of the golden calf, which indicates that from the time of its making, its worshipers were liable for the sin. This would seem to contradict our Mishnah, which says that if a Jew fashions an idol, it is not actually prohibited until he worships it, not from the moment of its manufacture. So the Gemara asks, why not say that this matter applies only with regard to rendering the man who made the idol liable for the sin? But the object of idolatry does not become prohibited until it is actually worshipped. So the Gemara answers, the verse states, cursed be the man who shall make a graven or molten image, an abomination to the Lord, the work of the hands of the craftsman, and shall set it up in a hidden place. Deuteronomy 27:15. Cursed be the man. This would be the source of the prohibition, that a person has violated this prohibition when he does it. How are we going to learn out that the object itself becomes prohibited for other Jews to benefit from it, either from the moment it's manufactured or from the moment when it becomes worship? This indicates that from the time of its making, the person who made the idol is liable to be cursed. We haven't yet learned when does the idol become prohibited for benefit. The Gemara asks, why not say that this matter applies only with regard to rendering the man who made the idol liable to be cursed? But the object of idolatry does not become prohibited until it is worshipped. And the Gemara answers, it is written, an abomination to the Lord. And this indicates that the idol is an abomination to the Lord and is therefore prohibited from when? as soon as it is made. Even before an idolater or, God forbid, a Jew comes along and worships it. The Gemara asks for Rabbi Akiva, who does not maintain that a Jew's idol is forbidden from the time that it is made. How does he interpret this verse? And so the Gemara answers that Rabbi Akiva explains that the term an abomination means an object that leads to abomination, but itself is not considered an abomination until it is worshipped as an idol. So the Gemara explains the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And as for the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, from where does he derive that a Gentile's object of idolatry is prohibited as soon as it is fashioned? Ula said, the verse states, the graven images of their gods you shall burn with fire. You shall not covet the silver or the gold that is on them and take it for yourself, lest you be ensnared thereby, for it is an abomination to the Lord your God, from Deuteronomy 7:25. The term graven image indicates that from the time the Gentile engraves and carves the stone into an idol, it becomes a god, right? An idolatrous god, and it is forbidden. The Gemara asks, and the other Tana, Rabbi Yishmael, how does he interpret this verse? And the Gemara answers that Rabbi Yishmael requires that verse for that which Rav Yosef teaches in a Baraisa, as Rav Yosef teaches, and from where is it derived that a Gentile may revoke the status of an object as his God, which we've learned before. This is derived from a verse, as it is stated, the graven images of their gods you shall burn with fire, the graven images. So the Gemara asks, and the other Tana, Rabbi Akiva, from where does he derive this law? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Akiva derives it from the interpretation of Shmuel, as Shmuel raises a contradiction. It is written, the graven images of their gods you shall burn with fire. You shall not covet the silver or gold that is on them. And in the continuation of the verse, it is written, and take it for yourself, indicating that one is permitted to take the silver and gold. And how do we reconcile these texts? If the Gentile engraved and carved the stone as a god, it is immediately rendered forbidden. A Jew can never benefit from it. And the prohibition, you shall not covet, applies to it. If the Gentile revoked pesalo, which is related, is a similar word to pesile, which is engraved, or the graven images of pesile, which is similar to pesalo, revoked. Right? So if the Gentile revoked the idol status as a god, then the continuation of the verse, and take it for yourself, applies. Right? We've seen that before. And a Jew cannot take an idol or the material that's been fashioned into an idol and say, I'm going to melt it down and then just use that metal for something else. He cannot remove the idol from the realm of idolatry. But the idolater can. He can say, I no longer want this to be an idol. I'm going to just use it to make a table out of it. I revoke its idolatrous status. Now that object can become permitted for a Jew to benefit from it. Obviously not for the purpose of idolatry, but then, to be used as some table or, flatware or hammers, whatever he wants to make it into, he could derive benefit from that object if the idolater removed it from the realm of idolatry. The Gemara asks, and as for the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, we found a source for the law that a Gentile's object of idolatry is prohibited immediately. From where do we derive that a Jew's object of idolatry is not forbidden until it is worshipped? Right? This disagrees with Rabbi Yishmael, but this is the view of our Mishna, and it is the law. So Rav Yehuda said that the verse states, cursed be the man who shall make a graven or molten image and shall set it up in a hidden place, from Deuteronomy 27:15. And this indicates that the idol is not rendered forbidden until the idolater performs in service of the idol those matters, i.e. those rituals that are performed in a hidden place. So the wording of that prohibition leads Rabbi Akiva to derive that the Jew may have had in mind to make this vessel or even this statue and use it for the purpose of idolatry, but until it actually gets used that way, it is not an idol or a vessel in the service of idolatry. The Gemara asks, and the other Tana, Rabbi Yishmael, how does he interpret this verse? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yishmael requires that verse for a different teaching. He requires it for that which Rabbi Yitzchak says, as Rabbi Yitzchak says, from where is it derived that a Jew's object of idolatry requires interment? right? That if it's going to be, if a Jew, God forbid, made an idol, what are we going to do with it? You have to bury it. Wait, bury it? Wouldn't we want to destroy it, grind it into dust, and get rid of it forever? Why would we bury it? Let's keep reading. This is derived from a verse, as it is stated, and shall set it up in a hidden place. Right? When he made this object of idolatry to commit the sin of idolatry, he's not going to do it openly. He's going to do it for some hidden place. And Rabbi Yitzchak interprets this as requiring one to inter the idol in a hidden place when we're getting rid of it. The Gemara asks, and the other Tana, Rabbi Kiva, from where does he derive this law? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Kiva derives it from that which Rav Chisda says, that Rav says. As Rav Chisda says, that Rav says, from where is it derived that a Jew's object of idolatry requires interment? This is derived from a verse. As it is stated, you shall not plant for yourself an Asherah, the kind of tree, of any kind of tree beside the altar of the Lord your God. Is it only next to the altar of God, either in the tabernacle or in the temple when it's standing in Jerusalem, that we're not permitted to plant an Asherah? An Asherah is a tree of idolatry. We're prohibited to plant that anywhere. So why mention to plant it beside the altar? What does this mean? The verse juxtaposes an Asherah, which is a tree used as part of idolatrous rites, to the altar. And this indicates that just as the altar requires interment, so too an Asherah requires interment. Why would the altar require interment? Because if there's a reason to get rid of the altar, right, or replace the altar, let's say that it became damaged and we're going to have to build a new altar. What do we do with the old altar? Well, that altar has so much inherent holiness that it was used in the temple as the altar of the Lord where sacrifices were brought. We can't just, put it in the dumpster now that there's a new altar. We have to bury it respectfully. What does that have to do with idolatrous objects? So too, an Asherah requires interment because this verse juxtaposes the Asherah and the altar. And the Gemara asks, and the other Tana, Rabbi Yishmael, how does he interpret this verse? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yishmael requires that verse for a different teaching, that which Reish Lakish says. As Reish Lakish says, anyone who appoints over the community a judge who is unfit for the position due to his lack of knowledge or, God forbid, wickedness, the one who appoints such a judge, such an unqualified judge to judge the people, the one who appoints him to that position is considered as though he plants an Asherah among the Jewish people. What a metaphor. As it is stated, quote, judges and officers you shall make for yourself in all your gates, Deuteronomy 16:18. And juxtaposed to it is the verse, you shall not plant for yourself an Asherah of any kind of tree beside the altar of the Lord your God, in Deuteronomy 16:21. So Rav Ashi says, and if one appoints an unsuitable individual as a judge in a place where there are Torah scholars, so he had a choice. He could have appointed a Torah scholar, but instead he appoints this incompetent or possibly even wicked person to be a judge. It is as though he planted an Asherah next to the altar, as it is stated, beside the altar of the Lord your God. Now, we've discussed repeatedly what a massive sin it is for a Jew to get involved in idolatry. And here, by way of analogy, it's definitely an analogy, it's a metaphor that they're saying, but it's like, right, it's teaching you that appointing a judge who is not fit to judge the people, a judge who will not only judge between people, in areas of financial damages, possibly even in capital cases, but one who will be trusted to issue rulings of Jewish law. And therefore, people will come to follow those rulings, thinking that they're following Torah law, and instead they're going to be violating Torah law. So installing a person who's either incompetent or wicked in that position is like planting an Asherah that's going to lead the people astray and into idolatry, because he's going to lead them away from Torah. Right? So think about it. A community leader that leads Jews away from Torah is like creating an idol or planting a tree of idolatry. It's a very strong and important metaphor. Think about it. Rav Hamnuna raises a dilemma. If one welded a broken vessel for idolatry, what is the law? We've been talking about one who fashions a new object of idolatry. What if he took something that was already created, not for the purpose of idolatry, but it was broken, and then he welded it, so it now became an object again. It was a broken object, now it's not a broken object, but his purpose in welding it and fixing the object was so that it could be used for idolatry. The question is this like fashioning a new object for idolatry or not? If one welded a broken vessel for idolatry, what is the law? And the Gemara asks, with regard to whose idolatry does Rav Hamnuna raise the dilemma? If we say that Rav Hamnuna is referring to a Gentile's idolatry, well, that is difficult, as both according to Rabbi Yishmael and according to Rabbi Akiva, vessels used in idolatry are considered accessories of idolatry, and accessories of idolatry are not prohibited until they are used for the worship. So the fact that he welded it hasn't been used for idolatry yet, only when it's actually used. Rather, Rav Hamnuna is referring to a Jew's idolatry, which would be prohibited for the moment it's fashioned, but that's only according to Rabbi Yishmael, not according to Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion does Rav Hamnuna raise the dilemma? If we say that he raises the dilemma in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, difficult. Now that the idol itself is not prohibited until it is worshipped, is it necessary to state that its accessories are not forbidden until they are used for idolatry? So rather, perhaps Rav Hamnuna raises the dilemma in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, who says that a Jew's idol is prohibited immediately. What about accessories to the idol? The Gemara suggests an explanation of the dilemma. What is the law with regard to a Jew's accessories of idolatry? Do we learn the law with regard to a Jew's accessories from the law with regard to a Gentile's accessories? Just as there in the case of the Gentiles' accessories of idolatry, they are not forbidden until they are actually used for idolatry. So too here, in the case of a Jew's accessories for idolatry, they not be forbidden for benefit until they actually get used for idolatry. Or perhaps the law is learned from the law with regard to a Jew's object of idolatry itself. And just as the idol is prohibited immediately, according to Rabbi Yishmael, so too its accessories are prohibited immediately. But the Gemara rejects this whole analysis. If that is the explanation of Rav Hamnuna's dilemma, why does he specifically raise the dilemma with regard to one who welded a broken vessel? Let him raise the dilemma with regard to one who fashioned it for idolatry from the first place. So the Gemara answers, Rav Hamnuna is referring to a vessel that was used for idolatry before it broke. And he is raising the dilemma with regard to the matter of previous tumah, ritual impurity. Right? The sages said that even though objects of idolatry, by Torah law, if you touch them, even by mistake, they don't impart tumah, but the sages by rabbinic decree said they do, so that we will distance ourselves from objects of idolatry. As we learned in a Mishna, Tractate Kelim 11.1, with regard to metal vessels, both flat vessels which have no repositories and their receptacles, vessels that have repositories, they are all tameh, all impure, if they came into contact with a primary source of ritual impurity. If they broke, they thereby become purified. If one remade the broken vessels into new vessels, they reassume their previous tumah. Even if it'll have that tumah whether it has to do with Avoda Zara or not. We're talking here about just if a vessel came into contact with a human corpse, it becomes tameh. Well, what if it broke and then was fixed? Once it broke, it's no longer a vessel. Then it was repaired. Is it a new vessel or is it the same old vessel that's still tameh? They're saying it's still tameh. And this is the dilemma that Rav Hamnuna is raising. When the Mishnah teaches that a vessel that is remade assumes its tumah, its impurity, does this matter apply only to impurity by Torah law, like touching a corpse? But in the case of impurity by rabbinic law, such as the impurity of an object of idol worship, an object of idolatry, of Avoda Zara, it would not apply. Or perhaps there's no difference between tumah by Torah law and tumah by rabbinic law. And the Gemara asks, if that is the explanation of Rav Hamnuna's dilemma, why does he specifically discuss a vessel used for idolatry? Let him raise the dilemma with regard to any other type of tumah by rabbinic law. There are other kinds of tumah that are by rabbinic law. And the Gemara answers, Rav Hamnuna is raising two dilemmas, one of which stems from the other. Is tumah derabanan, right, tumah by rabbinic law, reassumed or is it not reassumed? once it's fixed. And if you say that it is not reassumed, that it is a new object that doesn't reassume the tumah that it had before it broke, then what is the law with regard to the tumah of Avoda Zara? Did the sages render its status like the tumah by Torah law due to the stringency of idolatry or not? Teku. We don't know the answer. That dilemma was allowed to stand. New subject. Rabbi Yochanan raised a dilemma to Rabbi Yanai with regard to an offering consisting of food that is brought in Avoda Zara, in idolatry. What is the law? Food that was brought for the purpose of idolatry. Is the revocation of their status as an object of idolatry by a Gentile effective to purify them from their tumah of an offering brought in Avoda Zara, or is it not effective? Right? The idolater can revoke the idolatrous status of a statue that he worshipped and used as an idol, and then he can say, you know what? I give up idolatry. This statue is nothing. It's just a little piece of art. It is not a god to me. So now he revoked it from idolatry. Okay, and now, when it was an idol, a Jew could never benefit from that object. Now that it's been taken out of the realm of idolatry, a Jew could melt that down and use it to make a hammer. But what about food that was brought to that idol and therefore was used in the worship of the idol? Once he revokes the idol, can he also revoke that food that was brought as some kind of an offering for the idol? And the Gemara suggests, and let him raise the dilemma with regard to whether revocation of vessels status purifies vessels used in idolatry from their impurity. And the Gemara explains, Rabbi Yochanan does not raise the dilemma with regard to vessels, since they have the ability to attain purity by being immersed in a mikvah, right, a ritual bath. And therefore, their impurity can certainly also be nullified. But when he raises the dilemma, it is only with regard to food, because food can't pass through a mikvah. You can't immerse it in a mikvah to purify it from tumah, right? Since you can't purify it from tumah with a mikvah, maybe you also can't remove it from the realm of Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara suggests, let him raise the dilemma with regard to whether revoking its status purifies the object of idolatry itself in a case where it consists of food. The idolater was actually worshiping a head of lettuce. He made the head of lettuce his god, and then he revoked it. Does that lettuce now become permitted for eating by a Jew? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan does not raise the dilemma with regard to the object of idolatry itself. Now we're on 52b. As, since its prohibition is nullified, its impurity is also nullified. When he raises the dilemma, it is only with regard to an offering consisting of food that is brought in the process of idolatry. What is the law? Does one say that since its prohibition is not nullified in accordance with the statement of Rav Giddel, who teaches that the prohibition that takes effect with regard to offerings brought in idolatry is never nullified? Offerings, right? The idol could be nullified and revoked from idolatry, but offerings brought to the idol can never be nullified, can never be revoked and brought out of the realm of idolatry. Therefore, the impurity of this food is also not nullified. Or perhaps only their prohibition, which is by Torah law, is not nullified, but their tumah, which is by rabbinic law, is nullified. And the Gemara, right, there's a difference between is it prohibited for me to benefit from it and is it tameh and can impart tumah to other objects. Those are different questions, but this question never gets answered. Teku. New subject. Rabbi Yosei ben Shaul asked Rebbe, with regard to vessels that were used in the temple of Onias. Ha'onyo? Ha'onyo. Well, I'm just going to read it like it's in the English translation. Interesting. Okay. Where am I? Okay, so this is very interesting. The temple of Onias. Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul asked Rebbe, with regard to vessels that were used in the temple of Onias, what is the law with regard to using them in the holy temple? Step back. What's the temple of Onias? Fascinating. Let me just read you the background since it's written so nicely. Onias, a scion of the family of high priests after the Babylonian exiles, right? So after the destruction of the first temple, the Jews exiled to Bavel. Eventually, that lasted 70 years, and then the Jews were allowed to return because Nebuchadnezzar in Babylonia was defeated by the Persians, and eventually King Cyrus allowed the Jews to rebuild their temple and to return, and they came back with Ezra, Nehemiah, etc., and they rebuilt the temple. Okay. But a little bit earlier than that, you had priests that were serving in the first temple, and they all went to Bavel, and then some of them came back, right? Some of them came back, not all of them. So Onias, a sign of the family of the high priest after the Babylonian exile, he built a temple resembling the temple in Jerusalem, but not in Jerusalem. He built this imitation of the Holy Temple in the city Leontopolis in Egypt around the year 155 BCE. So that's quite a bit later. The second temple had already been created. This is actually around the time of the Hasmoneans, right? After the Hanukkah story in the mid to late Second Temple period. And, there was all kinds of political breakdowns and factions. Let me just read a little bit more. The Gemara relates that Onias fled to Egypt as a result of a conflict with his brother. But it would appear from Josephus that the matter was also connected with the conflict between the Hellenists and the Hasmonean dynasty. That's the wake of the Hanukkah story. The structure of Onias' temple resembled that of the Holy Temple with minor differences. And the priests who served there were descended from Aaron. So these were actual Kohanim that for whatever reason followed Onias. I guess they had some kind of political falling out, breakdown. We're not in Jerusalem. We're living in a Jewish community in Egypt in the Second Temple period, and they built a temple there, and they were bringing offerings to who? To some false deity? No, to God. They were Jewish and they wanted to honor God. The prohibition that they were violating is bringing offerings on an unauthorized altar, right? They built this unauthorized temple with its unauthorized altar, not in the place that God had designated, which was the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And they thought they could do Judaism their own way. Now, they were honoring God, so we can't say that they were idolaters. But they were definitely sinners because they were doing, their version of Judaism that was totally unauthorized. So that's the context that we are talking about. Right, so the priests who served there were descendants of Aaron. And although some sages held that Onias' temple should be viewed as a temple of idolatry outright, the predominant opinion seems to be that it was established as a temple for the service of God and for the sake of heaven. The essential problem with this temple was the fact that its very existence, the very existence of any temple beside the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, constitutes a serious transgression, punishable by karas, excision, death at the hands of the heavenly court. Therefore, the priests who served in this temple were rendered unfit for performing the priestly rites in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, like the priests who sacrifice offerings on personal altars. It wasn't personal altars per se. They weren't making their own backyard altars, but they were serving on an altar that was not the altar in the Holy Temple. So according to Josephus, Vespasian closed this temple about 3 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, and it is possible that it was operational again later in the time of Rabbi Yitzchak. Very interesting. All right, let's get back to the Temple of Onias. Essential problem, a prohibited temple, but not an idolatrous temple. So he raises the dilemma according to the opinion of the one who says that the temple of Onias was not a temple of idolatry. As we learned in a Mishna in Menachos 109a, priests who served in the temple of Onias may not serve in the temple that is in Jerusalem. And needless to say, those priests who served in a temple of something else, i.e. idolatry, they also may not serve in the temple in Jerusalem. Now, this distinction indicates that the temple of Onias was not a temple of idolatry. It was used for the service of God, but it violated the prohibition against sacrificing offerings outside of the temple in Jerusalem. Now the Gemara explains the dilemma. Does one say that it is only the priests that the sages penalized by preventing them from serving in the holy temple, as they possess awareness and are responsible for their actions, but they did not institute a similar decree with regard to vessels, as they are inanimate. Or perhaps there is no difference, and the decree also applies to the vessels. If it was used in prohibited worship, even to God, but on prohibited altars, the priest can no longer serve in the holy temple. What about the vessels that they use in the temple of Onias? Could those vessels be brought back and used in the holy temple? That's the question. Rebbe said to Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul, the vessels that were used in the temple of Onias are prohibited. And we possess knowledge of a verse for which this law was derived, but we forgot what the verse is. Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul raised an objection to this ruling from a verse referring to vessels of the temple that Ahaz had used for idolatry. All the vessels which King Ahaz in his reign did cast away when he acted treacherously, right, by a king of Israel promoting idolatry, terrible, terrible thing. So all the vessels, this is from 2 Chronicles 29:19. All the vessels which King Ahaz in his reign did cast away when he acted treacherously, we have prepared and sanctified, and behold, they are before the altar of the Lord. This would seem to indicate that vessels that were once used for idolatry could now be revoked from that status and be used in the holy temple. And what? Is it not the case that the term "we have prepared" means that we immerse them in the mikveh, and the term "sanctified" means that we sanctified them to be used again in the holy temple? And this would indicate that the vessels may be used in the temple even though they were used in actual idolatry. So Rebbe said to Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul, blessed are you to heaven, as you have returned my lost verse to me. That verse is the forgotten source of the law that Rebbe stated, and it should be interpreted as follows. We have prepared means that we interred them, and sanctified means that we sanctified other vessels in their stead, as the vessels used by Ahaz were forbidden. And the same applies to the vessels from the temple of Onias. Right verse, wrong interpretation until Rebbe brought it back. No, you can't immerse them in the mikveh and then use them in the holy temple. Rather, we bury them and then replace them, and then we'll have objects we can use in the holy temple. The Gemara suggests, let us say that the Mishnah supports Rebbe's opinion. The Mishnah in Midot 1:6. The northeast chamber of the hearth was the chamber in which the Hasmoneans sequestered the altar stones that the people of Greece desecrated. Hanukkah story. And Rav Sheshes says this means that they desecrated the stones by using them for idolatry. And this indicates that the temple vessels that were used in idolatrous worship can no longer be used and must be sequestered. Since they were once used for holiness in the temple, they can't be destroyed. But since they were then used for idolatry, we can never use them for holiness again. So you have to do what? Bury them. Rav Papa said that case of the altar stones is different, because there a sage found a verse and interpreted it homiletically, as it is written, and they shall profane my secret place, and robbers shall enter into it and profane it. That's Ezekiel 7:22. The verse indicates that when the Gentiles entered the temple and desecrated it, the altar was desacralized and acquired non-sacred status. Consequently, when the stones were subsequently used for idolatrous worship, they were rendered forbidden even for non-sacred use. And the Gemara explains why the altar's stones were sequestered. The Hasmoneans said, what should we do to revoke the stones' forbidden status? Shall we break them? That is not possible. As the Merciful One writes in the Torah, you shall build the altar of the Lord your God out of unhewn stones. Stones that are used for the altar can never have iron, not hammers nor chisels used on them to cut them up. Unhewn, right? You just find stones that are about the right size and use them to build the altar. Unhewn stones. So we can't break them up in order to bring them back. Shall we saw them without breaking them? That is also not a viable option. As the Merciful One states in the Torah, you shall lift up no iron tool upon them. There was therefore no alternative to sequestering them. They could only be sequestered. They can't be brought back into use. So the Gemara asks, but why did the Hasmoneans have no alternative? Let them break the stones and take them for themselves. Didn't Rav Oshaya say the sages wished to sequester all the silver and gold in the world because of the silver and gold of Jerusalem, most of which was consecrated to the temple treasury and became mixed with the other silver and gold in the world? And we discussed it and asked, is Jerusalem the majority of the world? That all the silver and the gold of the world should be forbidden? Because perhaps some of it, the gold that you're holding in your hand, actually came from the original gold that was consecrated? That it's so unlikely, right? The gold and silver that was consecrated for use in the Holy Temple is a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of all the silver and gold in the world. So even though it became mixed in, and we don't know, if a piece of gold that comes our way actually was used and was consecrated and therefore can only be used for holy purposes, we don't know. We can't know. But the odds are so tremendously against any gold coming our way that it was originally gold sanctified for the Holy Temple that we can assume it's not, right? That's the question they're arguing. I'm almost done. Questions or comments? Nina had to go out, so I'll be scanning the comments for that. So rather, Abaye said the sages wished to sequester all the worn out dinars of Hadrian and Trajan because of the coins of Jerusalem, as it was known that these coins did contain a large quantity of the temple treasury's gold and silver. They did not permit the use of these coins until they found a verse in the Torah indicating that it is permitted. And what was that? Quote, and robbers shall enter into it and profane it. Ezekiel 7:22. Profane it means remove it from the realm of holiness, rendering it permitted again when it comes back. The Gemara answers the two cases are not comparable. There, the coins of Jerusalem had not been used in the service of the Most High. They were only consecrated. Here, since the stones of the altar had actually been used in the service of the Most High, it is not proper conduct for an ordinary person to make use of them, and therefore the Hasmoneans sequestered those stones. Even by breaking them up, they could not remove them from the realm of holiness and let them be used for mundane purposes. So, since they could no longer be used as the altar, because the idolaters had profaned them, right, like desecrated them when they brought in idolatrous sacrifices, so awful, God forbid, in the Holy Temple itself, they rendered those stones unfit for use in the altar again, but you couldn't get rid of the altar, you couldn't dispose of it in any other way, so they buried it. Very similar to what we do now with holy books, right? You can't burn them, you can't recycle them. What do? We bury them. Okay, and that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3. And we'll pick it up tomorrow, regular Friday time, noon Pacific, with Mishnah number 4 here in chapter 4. And let me take some questions by scanning the comments myself. Let's see. For the sneeze, Zeigazut. Thank you. Lucy, could a Jewish craftsman make vessels and sell them to Gentiles who might use them for idolatry? Could he even make statues of idols and sell them as mementos to tourists who may or may not venerate them in some way? I'm not sure. I feel like, since the Jew could make such an object and it's not rendered prohibited until it's actually worshipped, so therefore it's not prohibited for him to benefit from it. So he could sell it. Now, should a Jew be manufacturing items for the purpose of idolatry? Surely no. But is it permitted ab initio? I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that we've really answered that question yet. Stay tuned. Sharon, why in heaven's name would you even want an idolatrous worship item in the Holy Temple in the first place? You never would. But right during that war, the Hellenists brought it in. Or during the Roman occupation, the Romans brought it in. So they desecrated those stones. So it's not that you're going to want to bring them back into use as the holy altar. The question is, could you break them and then just use them for building blocks, to build a house for non-sacred purposes? And the answer is no. They couldn't even do that. They had to bury it. There's a lot of discussion going on. Nina normally moderating the discussion, which is great. So I'm just scanning quickly. So in Mexico near the pyramids, replicas of the Aztec gods are made and sold. Can a Jew buy those? You certainly don't want to do that, right? You certainly don't want to do that. Now, I guess the two sides of that argument are, well, yeah, but nobody is worshiping that, right? The Aztec religion, I don't think anyone is practicing it in the modern world. And it's just a tourist item, and the Jew who purchases such an object, he's not planning to worship it. It's just a souvenir from the fact that he visited those Aztec or Mayan pyramids. So can he buy that? I'm sure that, pious people wouldn't. Is it actually prohibited? Probably not, because it never was for the purpose of idolatry. I think the issue would be Marisayan, right? Like the appearance of impropriety, so you wouldn't want it. I mean, I'm well aware, right, that solar calendar, right, that round solar calendar, a lot of people have keychains and T-shirts, and it just reminds them that they went on a really interesting trip to Mexico. And I don't know, by the way, that calendar, I don't think they actually bowed down to the calendar. It was just how they measured time. But probably there were all kinds of figures on it that were figures of idolatry. And that would definitely be problematic. So I don't know, but there's definitely, Google halacha, Mayan sun calendar, or Aztec sun calendar. What is it? We'd have to just look that up and you could get an answer pretty quickly. I just don't know off the top of my head. My instinct is probably not prohibited, but you shouldn't do it anyway. That's my guess. I wonder if I'm right. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Friday, regular Friday time, noon Pacific. Have a great night.